Hey everyone. Good. Looks like a few people are tuning in already. Hi, I'm Susan. Give me a moment while I get my Instagram people up and running. Okay, and back to the comments. Good. Ali, Terry, Sandra, Janice. Excellent. Okay, so nice to see you all here. I'm Susan Smith. You're in my workspace studio, Stitched by Susan. Today's topic is literally what I am working on at this moment. And I was quilting last night and advancing my quilt, and I thought, you know, this might be of help to other long armers. And so I just paused my quilt where it was and set it up for this morning's topic. So talking about wonky quilts, that's maybe too strong of a word, but basically talking about managing the flatness and squareness of a quilt with each advance. And I know I've alluded to this just a little bit before, just talking about that this is a step-by-step process, and it is something that I address with each advance. Looks like everyone's able to hear. I keep looking at the comments just to be sure, so forgive me when I'm sideways. But I set up my camera this morning such that you could see down my long arm rails, because that's what I want to talk about a little bit. So I've got this quilt loaded. If I move back a little and if I move my face in, you get to see it a little bit. I don't know what the pattern is. It's a block that's kind of started in the middle with the rectangle and then frames that go around and around and around it. And this quilt is made by a first-time quilt maker. She did a great job. Honestly, she did a great job. Because the truth is, even when I have absolutely perfectly flatly pieced quilt tops, there still is management necessary. It's possible to knock those out of whack, because the same way that you can ease fabric into where you want it to go, it's also equally easy to stretch it out of square. And so managing is something that I do with every single quilt. But this one has some specific things that I thought I could point out to you. So you've seen these rectangular blocks. They're about 14 inches by 16, I would say. And there's a center block plus 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 borders around it, 6 1-inch borders around it. So that's a lot of space for the block to get a little bit wonky. And indeed, I'm not sure if you'll be able to see it on camera looking down the side of it, but you can see there's a bit of ripples going on, and that's part of that effect. The centers of the blocks are a bit full, and so the edges bow just a touch. So I've advanced my quilt, I've rolled it up, and when I do that, I always tug both batting and quilt top toward me and smooth it down all the way along, so that I know it's pulled nice and taut, not stretched within an inch of its life, but just so there's no excess stuff up there. And then, and here's today's key, I stand at my long arm rail and literally look down it. What do the straight seams look like? And I can see there's a bit of bowing happening in each of these blocks. It's not very much, it's less than 1/4 of an inch, but it is present. And if I don't address it now, when I advance the next time, guess what? It's going to be doubled. I'm going to have this plus any stretching in the next set of blocks, and now I'm going to be a 1/2 inch out, and it's going to start getting difficult to deal with. So the number one key is manage as you go. With every single advance of the quilt, deal with whatever is present on your quilting surface right then. Then you'll be able to deal with the next one when you get to it. So here's how I do it. I stand here, I look along my seams, and I say, okay, this one needs to be pushed up about that much, and I'm just gently nudging it with the flat of my hand. And then if there is a bit of excess, I'm kind of brushing it up so it's pretty evenly distributed. I'm not going to get it all right here when I go to quilt it. I'll do one that's closer so you can see it. I'm just brushing that fabric until that seam line looks visibly straight. And any excess, I'm kind of distributing up into the quilt so that it's not all right here when I come to quilt it. It's distributed a little bit. And I'm quilting this floral, fairly curvy design, so it's going to take that up with no problems at all. And I'll just do that all the way along the quilt top until I think that those seam lines look pretty straight. So again, I'm standing, I'm using my long arm rail. It's my key, it's my guideline. And you know, the blocks do not perfectly line up with each other, and that's okay. It's still going to look square and flat when it's done. That's the best possible result that I can get with this quilt, and I think it's going to look really great when it's finished. So let's look at some comments. You're going to get to see the side of my face while I'm reading. Mary Ellen, Teresa, Beta I think was from Poland, if I recall yesterday. Charlene, Adrienne, made by Manatee, also in Germany, awesome. Kirsten, in Germany, she can hear me fine. Good, I don't have to yell for you to hear me in Germany. Great. Shelley, great subject. Pato Pereira in Argentina, awesome. Jean, Carol, Ohio. I'm just going a little more quickly now to see if I'm seeing any questions. Nadia in Switzerland. Well, I'm seeing you from all over the world, so that's great. For me, it is Sunday morning, and I'm quickly getting in this live before it's time to head off to church for me. I'm not seeing any questions. If you have any, feel free to type them in. I'll chat for just a minute more till we see if some come in. And here's one from Janice. If you know before loading that one border is longer than another, does that affect which way you load it? It could, Janice. I'm more likely to have that decision weighted by where I want the seam allowance in the backing, for example, or which direction I want my quilting to go. Because as long as I know which border is longer, no matter which side it is on, I can deal with it. The key is being aware and dealing with it as it comes and not leaving those ugly surprises till the last pass when it's sort of too late and you end up with pleats. Brooklyn, New York. DP Hawk from Whidbey Island. Diane. I'll try and remember that, Diane. Alice. Quilting by Lee. Janelle. I always work the wonky down, but never thought of moving it upwards also. Absolutely. And I think that's a big key. And maybe a secondary tip right here would be choose a quilting design that will pull that in. If you know that your quilt has got a little bit of unevenness and you're a little worried about your ability to deal with it, pick something that's got some curves that will pull that in a little bit. Rather than, like, this might not have been a great candidate for ruler work, for example, long straight lines. Like, how would you pull that fullness in? But anything edge to edge with a little bit of curve to it will really be helpful. And so you can brush, can't see it now, you can brush that up into your work surface, kind of distribute it, and it'll all quilt in very, very nicely. It'll all buff out, my one son always says. Pandora, do you ever lift the top to make sure the batting is flat? I certainly have done that, like over the years, because I've done so many quilts. I don't very much anymore because I can tell by the look of it or even the feel of it running my hand across it, but it is absolutely key to know that the batting is flat. So if lifting the quilt top helps you to know that for sure, absolutely, absolutely. Quilting by Lee thought it was just me that used the bar to see alignment of blocks. Oh no. I mean, it's the longest straight line, so why not use it for your visual guide for sure. So many threads. What about a quilt that due to bias blocks gets fat in the middle? I had one that was 6 to 7 inches wider in the middle. Wow, that is certainly a lot. You know, if you knew that going into it, that's a lot. I would probably bring other things to bear, like steaming or spray starching is good at actually pulling in some excesses of fabric, because the truth is you cannot stretch out those outer borders to be bigger. You've got to take in whatever that area is that is more. The trick with bias is it can be sometimes difficult to see what those horizontal straight lines are, but there are usually seam lines somewhere. That's a very general answer, but I hope that helps a little bit. Mary Ellen, please talk about how you manage time when quilting for others. Is it a time element or project element? I'm not sure what your final question is, Mary Ellen. It's kind of off topic for today, but I'll give you this little tip. I'm getting pretty good nowadays at estimating what my time will be, and for edge-to-edge work, I typically charge per square inch. So it's literally by the amount of inches that are in the project that I'm working on, but I arrived at that number by having a pretty good idea how much time it would take me and knowing what I wanted to earn per hour, and that's kind of how I arrived at my so many cents per inch. But also, early on, I used to actually keep a stopwatch on my start phone, and I would log my time spent quilting so that I could start to get a realistic estimate. And by the way, do not forget to count in there your time spent, you know, consulting, drawing up ideas, looking for things on Pinterest, etc., etc. That's all part of the process, in my opinion. Carol, have learned so much here. The last quilt I did was almost perfect when I folded it in quarters. Yay, you, Carol. Good job. Terry, will you be using any magnets on this one? Yes, I will, Terry. I didn't show that this morning, but that would be my next step before I start quilting. And yesterday I lost the camera when I bent down to pick them up, so I'm not going to today. But yes, I will put my magnet strips on the front of this to hold everything where I want it now that I've got it in place. Janice, you're a great teacher. Thanks. So many threads. Thank you. When adding starch, do you spray it on? Yes, I do. And what I use for some of the worst stretch cases is spray starch, like in an aerosol can, and fairly generously soak the surface that is too big and then leave it to air dry, and it will actually pull in some percentage. Steam helps with that too, like passing a hot steamer or steaming iron near the surface. That steam will help to pull up a little bit too. There's lots of side things there about knowing your fabric, knowing you won't have bleed, etc., but those are options for sure. Susie, what about using automation for not square quilts? How do you prevent buckers and bubbling? Good question, Susie, and I am not a super duper expert on using automation because I use it a very small percentage of the time. And I don't use it on my worst quilts because I find them easier to manage when I'm managing every single stitch. But occasionally I've seen a puckery area, and as my machine is approaching it and getting ready to stitch there, I'm standing there, moving that fabric around a little bit with my hands and arranging it and distributing it and controlling it. That's my fix. Virginia, Mary Ellen, do you quilt for so many hours a day? I don't, Mary Ellen, and there was a time when I quilted for more hours a day. I think probably my upper limit, though, would have been something like 25 or 30. Again, that has to do with the fact that I do most of my quilting where I'm running the machine. You cannot quilt 8 hours a day like that. It is physically very, very tiring. You know, head bent doing the quilting. So know yourself, know your style of quilting, intersperse it with doing other things, that sort of thing. Okay, that looks like a ton of questions. Good deal. Okay, let me just add here before I run, I will be live, as many of you already know, every day in the entire month of April. I try to do it in the morning specific time. So live on YouTube, Facebook, or Instagram, you can catch it either place, just talking about things relating to machine quilting. And every day the topic is a little bit different. Lots of you have suggested topics. Feel free to keep on doing that. So this is leading up to the opening of enrollment for my freehand quilting masterclass near the end of this month. And it is a big old masterclass with multiple modules teaching the quilting of over 30 designs step by step, and more than other courses I think have is this emphasis on teaching how I come to those designs, how they evolve, how I edit them or change them or grow them or just change them up so that you can use this as a springboard. So you've got these 30 designs under your belt, but now you can go and bring in your own ideas to your quilting. And okay, how can I make this be a lovely edge-to-edge design or custom design that I can quilt on my quilt tops? So it's kind of that dual focus, learning the quilting, lots of practice and skill developing tips, and then learning how I devise and create new designs so that you can do the same thing. Checking one last time for the questions. Oh, Susie, still haven't finished the one from November, meaning my masterclass from last November, but I can vouch what I've done is amazing. That's so awesome, so awesome. Later in the month, I'll share a few student success stories too, because some of you have written back to me, and I sure have appreciated that. I got an email the other day from a lady who had finished 43 quilt tops to give away in the period of time of the masterclass, and before that, her long arm was just kind of an expensive coat rack in the corner gathering dust. So that was really cool. 43 quilt tops. I was happy to see that. Okay. Thanks you all for joining me this morning. Thank you all. Tongue twister. I appreciate it. I will be back tomorrow. New topic. I'm thinking the first couple days of this week we're going to talk about threads. What type of thread I like to use for machine quilting. And then some chat about how I choose a color, especially on multicolored quilts. How do you choose thread for that? So those are some of the topics that are coming up this week. Hope you'll join me then, and I will check back with you soon. Thumbs up if you've enjoyed this, and I'll catch you next time.